Welcome to the Practitioners Rise podcast. I'm your host, Haley Krajewski, marketing strategist, natural health advocate, and a mom on a mission. Each week, I sit down with natural health and wellness practitioners from around the country who are doing incredible life-changing work. We go deep on the things you've been Googling at midnight, share real tips and resources, and my hope is that you walk away feeling more informed, more empowered, and more confident in the choices you're making for yourself and your family. Because I fully believe that when practitioners rise, entire communities rise with them. So let's dive in. Today's guest knows what it looks like to look healthy on the outside while quietly struggling on the inside. Dr. Morgan Hope is a perinatal and pediatric chiropractor at the Wellness Way Eau Claire, who helps women, babies, and families create healthier lives through nervous system-focused care, hormone education, fertility support, nutrition, and intentional lifestyle changes. But before she came Dr. Hope, she was a college athlete who looked every bit the part of someone in peak health. Painful periods, skin issues, fatigue, allergies, inflammation, frequent medications, constant symptoms that had become so normal she didn't think to question them. And it wasn't until chiropractic school that she realized many of the things she'd accepted as normal weren't actually normal at all. And so that realization launched her into her own healing journey and eventually led her to become a patient of the Wellness Way before joining the team herself. Now she helps families discover that symptoms aren't inconveniences to suppress, but messages worth understanding. So Dr. Morgan, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Haley.
So I like to give people a bit of background just so they know where you're coming from, and it really helps kind of set the stage. So in the intro, I noted too that you were a college athlete. So from the outside, most people probably assumed you were the picture of health, right? What was actually going on behind the scenes?
Yeah. And a lot of my friends actually even looked at me way back when being as like the health nut. And I was not really a health nut back then. I was like very anti health when you really just dissected my lifestyle and routine. I just worked out a lot and I liked healthy foods. Doesn't mean I always ate healthy foods. Definitely had my fair share of fast food. And I had a lot of unregulated patterns that I let just take over at the time. I was an athlete. Yes, I was active every day. I might have looked healthy. I might have had muscle, right, or been fit or tone. But behind the scenes, a lot of the times I was struggling with allergies. I was taking a nap like it was my job because I couldn't even make it through like a full day of class or practice. I was frequently ill to the point where there was a time I think I was on antibiotics for probably about 3 to 6 months for various conditions. I had skin issues that I was taking acne medications for and using topical creams for. I had painful periods that I had been on birth control for a long time, and no one ever taught me at that point that that was suppressing my normal hormones. So I was just told that all of these things would fix my symptoms, and I assumed that because the symptoms were fixed, that I was healthy. But the truth is, I wasn't. I just wasn't functioning. And I think that's where a lot of people are today. They're getting by, they're not really actually thriving.
Yes. And I think so many people are actually in that situation that just believe it's normal or it's just a part of how they have to live because nobody's really taught them any differently. And I
Right.
think now there is so much more information and there's so much more education, which is exactly why this podcast exists to help people know they don't have to struggle with that. But I know, and I can almost guarantee that even kids in college, women in college, even men in college are dealing with some of these things that they just take the medication, hope it gets better, or we're also always have been taught like this quick fix, right? So I just want to go get a quick fix when sometimes the natural route tends to take longer. They don't actually see the other side of what that can create from them.
Exactly.
So when did you finally realize, or take me to the moment when you finally realized like these things aren't normal, right?
Yeah.
And where did you start to shift? Because I'm sure that could be a lot to take in all at once because it kind of sounded like you had a lot going on.
So it was actually during chiropractic school, and my vision of chiropractic, even going into chiropractic schools, was very different than the way I came out of chiropractic school. I had known that chiropractic was amazing for pain management, and it can be great for headaches and neck pain and low back pain. I didn't really understand that it was a full body wellness concept, really, as a profession. So it was during school that I was introduced to so many classmates for the first time that grew up very differently than me. People that were prioritizing nutrition, movement, and nervous system health. People that had never even been on an antibiotic or needed one, or never even had a surgery or their tonsils out. And I started realizing how sick and how different it was that I was raised, and that I had basically just come to accept what was common as my normal. But in reality, it was super empowering, but it was also frustrating too. And I wasn't necessarily mad at my parents because they didn't know any better. I was frustrated that no one had ever suggested to them, hey, this could be done differently, because clearly so many of my classmates had lived a very different life and were given the alternatives, but no one had ever taught us differently. We were just constantly managing symptoms.
And I think, even for me on my family's health journey, kind of some of those same things, like my kids dealing with allergies and asthma. And the more that you start digging in, the wider everything becomes like, why was I never taught this? Why is there not more information out there? It's hard. And I said this on the last episode I was recording, but it's hard not to look back and say, okay, done all these things wrong, but just looking into the future. Now, what can we do instead to prevent it so it doesn't happen again? So, how do those symptoms you described look different now? Like, where are you now in terms of painful periods or allergies or all of the things that you had going on, even just the exhaustion? I know that's a big.
Yeah. I mean, they virtually don't exist. Like that is the cool thing about being able to take charge of your health and really looking at things from a different lens, is there's always a reason why your body's giving you those signals and why it's telling you that these things are going on. And once you really uncover either what you're doing in your own routine or what you're coming in contact with or whatever it might be that's off in your body, you really don't have those symptoms constantly anymore. You shouldn't, right? It's no different than like when you're running low on gas or when you need an oil change, like the light's going to come on, but you can easily fix that and resolve it and not have it continue to give you that light every single day, right? That's what I would say, is like they don't exist. They might come in fleeting moments. And it's always a gentle reminder to me, like, hey, I've got to take a step back and take better care of myself. And it just gives me like that full empowerment on how I can take care of my body better.
Can you share more about, because I think that's so true. Like we all fall off track, right? It's
Yes.
easy to start with a routine and everything's feeling good. And it's like, okay, maybe I can cheat here and there. Maybe I can do these things. And then all of a sudden it's like full blown back to where you were before. I know that's happened to me. We're working on getting back on track. But it's a good reminder. But I think you have to notice that reminder and
Mhm.
notice what your body is telling you. So, can you maybe walk us through like what are some of the things you did to start getting on that path of healing? Because, like you said, you liked healthy foods.
Mhm.
You did the things, but it might not have been what was right for your body.
Yeah, absolutely. So I, first of all, like I found alternative doctors who were willing to listen, right? I think that is definitely step one. If you are frustrated doing the same thing you're always doing, you're going to continue to be frustrated. And that's ultimately what led me here down the road, was that I got really frustrated seeing all these doctors and knowing that I could feel differently, that I started making those changes. My classmates were like, oh, well, just do this instead for your allergies, or do this instead, cut this food out. And I was doing those things and I was stopping the medications, and my body like still wasn't resetting the way that I thought it would be. So that was like very enlightening, was I had to almost pour back in and unravel all of the things that I had already done in my body, and it wasn't an overnight thing. So the consistency and the routine really did come into play, but it was like getting outside help too. And just knowing that, yes, my classmates might have been able to just not take Advil for a headache and drink some water and have their headache go away. For me, it like still wasn't working. So there was still like lessons that I needed to learn and things I needed to fix in my body. So like getting the proper testing really made the difference there. Even like certain foods, people were all about kale chips and beets and all of these things way back when. And I started enjoying those foods and I felt worse eating them, but it's because I was allergic to them. So, like, getting even in depth allergy testing made a big difference for me and for my immune system. So, there was some alternative labs that I had to deal with too, and some supplemental recovery. Like, I definitely took some supplements for a while to help my body on that path to healing because it wasn't just doing it without me because it was just so damaged at that point.
Mhm. And I think that's important to note too. And what can also be, because I've heard this a lot of like, well, if I go there, they're just going to give me all of these supplements to take. And then I'm going to be on this whole new routine. And that gets overwhelming. But knowing that it's not a forever thing, right? It's a long time for your body to get where it is. I'm guessing it's going to take a little bit of time to getting back to where it needs to.
Yes, yes, correct. And it's not an overnight thing, exactly as you said, Haley. So it's just knowing that it's temporary. Your body is always trying to innately protect you and keep you going. People ask us about like detoxing all the time, right? Like your body naturally detoxes until it can't, right? Until your body needs the help, until it's so backed up that it just cannot do it on its own. And my body and so many other of my patients' bodies, they're just at that stuck point where it's just your body's trying to do the best it can, but often it needs a little bit of aid. And that's where like supplements can come in too.
And so, how at your office then do you look into that? And I think detoxing is a good point because for a while there was, but knowing like there's not a one size fits all detox, and they're
Right.
probably not all good for you.
So we have certain detoxes that we'll put people through if they're ready and when they're ready. I mean, there are patients that I have never done like a quote unquote detox with, but we're working on detoxing simultaneously that whole time by changing their diet, by giving them some liver support, by giving them things that they can do at home, things that encourage lymphatic drainage or circulation, just gentle therapies that they can include with their routine. I think I'm more preempted to do something like that with my patients than like put them through a quote unquote detox. Do I think like a 30-day no sugar diet is super helpful for everybody, especially like post Thanksgiving and Christmas and Halloween? Yes, absolutely. I could benefit from that too. Right. But for a lot of people, it's like doing a certain one size fits all detox sometimes can be doing more harm than good. You have to make sure the gut is in check. You have to make sure your hormones are ready for it. You have to make sure you don't have a bunch of junk in your routine that your body's going to constantly fight while you try to detox. So I think taking those like preliminary steps too can make a big difference. But ultimately, I don't really put anybody through like a one size fits all detox. It's a lot of the times just how many ways can we gently detox in your routine alongside what you're doing already.
And how do you decide? I'm assuming you do different testing for people based on what their symptoms are. I want to shift gears a little bit because I think this will kind of lead into what we're talking about, especially with hormones and health. And so much of it plays a part together, right? And so you mentioned in the application or, the form to fill out that there was a time when becoming a mom didn't feel guaranteed to you. And I'd love it if you're willing to share what that season of your life was like. And then we can kind of walk through that together and things that you did to change that.
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, it was a very eye-opening season of my life. So, like I had hinted prior, like my body just didn't bounce back when I stopped all my medications, when I started doing all the things that my holistic friends were doing because they had never been on birth control. They had never been on antibiotics. So, like, I was already very, like, way behind at that point. So, when I got off birth control, and this was after being on for nearly, I don't know, 9, 10 years, it was wild because my body didn't respond right away. And I didn't get my period back right away. I would have sometimes 70 to 80 days between cycles, and then I would be bleeding super heavy. I got the nasty periods I had always had prior. I got these migraines back. My body started to lose some weight, and my blood sugar started to stabilize because metabolically that had thrown me off during while being on birth control. But beyond that, I was getting sicker in a lot of different ways. And I didn't realize the aftermath it really had. So basically, all the symptoms I had prior to birth control came back and came back with a vengeance. And as I started to realize that my periods weren't really evening out, this was like 6 to 9 months even after coming off of birth control. I was like, wow, this is kind of serious. I wonder if I'm going to be able to have a baby someday, because that was one of the reasons I stopped. Was I learned how toxic it was, not only to my own body, but that obviously that was going to impact future fertility. So I started to wonder, like, am I at risk for breast cancer? Am I at risk for heart attack and stroke? Like all these side effects and symptoms that I learned about, and what scared me so bad about being on it for so long. And so I started seeking out different care around. I was in the Atlanta area at the time, and I was going all around Atlanta trying to find different hormone specialists. I started having gut symptoms. I started having some other symptoms pop up following birth control because essentially it had suppressed my body for so long. And none of these doctors were communicating properly with each other. I was getting bounced around doctor to doctor. I was getting referred out like crazy. And it seemed like the appointments were just never ending and we weren't actually getting anywhere. And at some point, like I had made the connection where, okay, it kind of feels like all of these symptoms are connected. Everything seems to get worse on my period. I had some friends that suspected that maybe I struggled with endometriosis and PCOS, which I found out much later that I did. But none of the doctors were willing to even consider that. They were like, okay, your periods suck. You clearly just need to get back on birth control. Or I had even a few doctors throw out a hysterectomy to me, and I was in my early 20s. And that just sounded so crazy, so bizarre, because here I knew all these other women getting off birth control and having babies down the road, but why was my body stuck? Why was my body just one of the broken ones, right? So I stubbornly didn't want to believe that diagnosis, and I knew there was something more going on, and there has to be an alternative, right? Like I got on this path because so many of my classmates, they knew about alternatives. So, like, where is my alternative, right? So, I started going to different alternative doctors then because I was sick of the specialists. I was wasting money. I was still ending up in the ER all the time. I couldn't get through a day of school, a week of school, let alone without being on some serious painkillers and things to stop the bleeding. So, it got pretty severe to where I like couldn't really go about my daily life. And so I was like, okay, this is super frustrating. I can't live the rest of my life like this, but I know getting back on the pill and getting a hysterectomy is not the answer either. So I started seeking out alternative care. I got some help. I got some different information. It seemed very one size fits all and just very generic. Did I try to apply it? Absolutely. Right. It just didn't seem like, again, they were going in depth enough. So at that time, one of my classmates had been actually getting care with the Wellness Way for some similar hormone problems. And she was like, I did the same thing. I tried out everybody. You have to get your own labs done because they need to see what's actually going on with your body. And I was like, no, 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 all the specialists already ran these labs. And she's like, not those kind of labs. You need to get more in depth labs. I promise you, they're not doing enough investigating for you. And so I did. I sought out care with the Wellness Way. And for the first time, I was absolutely validated. Like my hormones were a train wreck. And that's exactly what was happening each month. My hormones were a train wreck. I was super inflamed. I did have gut issues, probably linked to years of antibiotics and being on the birth control pill. I had mold toxicity. I had all of these things going on, like metabolically and liver dysfunction and gallbladder health issues. I had all of these things going on that no one had ever taken a step back and thought about correcting or thought about even addressing. And learning that a lot of it could be fixed through just changing the way I was living was very eye opening. And that's what I was looking for all along. I was like, there has to be a different way that, yes, it might be slower, but there's got to be a way that I can focus on me and take care of me better for once in my life and change that outcome down the road. I was just not convinced that there was just no way I was going to carry a baby without being on medications and HRT and birth control, right? Like I was convinced I could do it differently. So that's what really led me here.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. And I think that brings up such an important part because I was just talking with someone else about endometriosis. Did I say it right? Eh, And her only option, or as they told her, was a hysterectomy.
Mhm.
And she went through with it, wasn't able to have children. And so hearing you say this as like maybe there are more options out there. And I'm sure there's other people listening that maybe are going through this. And this almost makes me emotional, but like that's that's really scary when you're told like these are your only options, but look at you now. Like you're feeling
Yeah,
really great. And yes, it probably took some hard work on your point and investing in yourself, but now you have this whole life ahead of you. So I
absolutely.
don't know if you want to talk more into that. Like, what are people's options? Are there some that like surgery is the only option, or is it just digging deeper into okay, what caused this?
And I think it's so important to not also discredit the impacts that sometimes, like medically, might be necessary. There's definitely a time and place where, like, yes, you might have to get your uterus scraped, right? Yes, you might have to get some cysts removed if they're blocking your fallopian tubes, which I got to a point in my health where my endometriosis and my PCOS was that severe. I still needed a surgery. So I won't sugarcoat that, but there was a point where it was the only roadblock left. And it was years of working on my health and getting my periods better, getting things more normal, getting things where they weren't forming that same pattern of how are these growths continuing to form in my body, because that's ultimately what it was. It was my body letting these alternative pathways and hormone growths continue to form because of how unstable my health was. So I worked on it for a few years prior to getting some of those surgeries. And there's patients that I see, don't get me wrong, Haley, that never need that surgery. And they have very mild cases of PCOS. And we track and we measure their cysts and we see them physically shrink over time, which is so stinking cool that the body can also do that. But there are people that, that tissue, that scar tissue essentially is what endometriosis is. And adenomyosis is what I had. So those two, like they can literally fuse together some of your fallopian tubes, right? They can fuse your uterus to your abdominal wall. I had tissue up in my chest cavity. Like it was just tissue overgrowth all around my body, my bowels. And so there was a point where like your body isn't undoing that scar tissue either. So there is sometimes like a surgical intervention necessary, but you have to make sure your body is ready for that. Otherwise, you are at risk for years and years of repetitive surgery. That was a long time ago, but I had doctors that said, okay, now that you get this surgery, because that's what they're used to, they weren't co managing me otherwise. They're like, you'll come back next year and you'll get the same surgery again, because that's what we usually see. And I was like, no, you won't. I'll never come back. So again, I was like super stubborn, but I was like, you are never going to see me again. This is the one time I'm ever going to get this. And I promise you that I'm never letting these things form in my body ever again. So, I mean, that's what I teach my patients is like, if we can get there without, we will absolutely get there without surgical intervention. we'll get there without you taking hormone blockers, right? But unfortunately, some women, they're so scared into doing that immediately that they end up getting the repetitive surgeries and HRT and hormone blockers down the road because they don't take care of their body prior. They don't do the cleanup before the surgery. So it really was a lot of cleanup for me personally before and after the surgery. But afterwards and before, like I already knew things were getting better. And so I knew I was at a really good place.
And, I think some of that, like you said, some women are so scared into doing these things because I think just over time, that's just how it's become. And,
Mhm.
that is sad. But also, what I've been talking with, and one of my clients and friends, and she's a chiropractor, is like sometimes the hardest part is trusting your body, that
Yep.
it really can do amazing things. But
Yes.
trust can be the hardest thing.
Yep. And it was really hard to trust my body for, change is slow, health is slow when you actually do it the right way in the body. So, like every 3 to 6 months, I'd be like, okay, is my period a little bit better, a little bit worse? What would I rate it out of this? How much am I bleeding? What other symptoms am I having? But I would really have to just be mindful for those 3 to 6 months of just like tracking things. And that's where some of the retesting came in that I was able to see physical change and then knew that my body was like at its max for its healing potential without things physically being blocked internally. And so being able to trust and know that my body got that far and knowing that if I continued living the way I was now living in my health journey, that I would never let those things form in my body ever again. I would never be back where I was because I wasn't willing to go back there. And so having that sort of trust too, knowing that I put in the work to get here and I saw my body change over time, let me know, okay, fertility is still an option for me down the road. I'm gonna have a baby. I'm gonna have a baby naturally. And we are, right? We're days away at this point of having our first baby without any trials and tribulations.
Would see that because I can only see your face, but
Yeah, so I
congratulations.
do have a big belly down here too, but we are days away from like a very healthy birth. I mean, I'm envisioning this. I've done all the prep. We had a very easy asymptomatic pregnancy, no issues with conception. Like it was, we put in the work and we knew what it took to get here. And it was like that profound trust that really, I think, has allowed me to physically be here right now.
Oh my gosh, that makes me so happy for you. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Okay, so I think that leads me into all of this leading up and you dealing with those symptoms and what we just talked about. Like, do you believe that there are a lot of other people out there struggling with that right now because of the birth control being pushed or because the antibiotics, or like what's causing this to happen in women? Or is it just like a fluke thing that we get those?
No, no, not at all. Not at all. I think today's American lifestyle is one of the most toxic things women can. And the fact of birth control, right, being given out like candy. I think our generation of women has been a total mass experiment. And the HPV shot, right, and the amount of toxins that young girls are introduced to, right, like the young beauty at Ulta or whatever that is. Like there's just so many trends these days that people are too willing to honestly let their little girls go into, but it's because we aren't, again, the parents aren't educated on safety, right? That there might be a risk to this, right? There's no open communication about how these things might pose risk, right? My mom never got that sit down talk when they offered me birth control at 11 or 12 years old and said, well, this could impact your daughter's future fertility. Like there was no risk provided for her. And I think in so many ways, there is that blind trust that there is a protection out there for us and that we must care about each other's safety because other things they wouldn't exist, but that's not the truth. So I think a lot of it is just the mistrust in the standards and just letting everybody follow that, right? The air quality, the chemicals, the things in our food, right? They're talking about adding growth hormone into meat and doing like lab grown things. Like it's crazy. But no one ever questions that because it's just on the shelf, right? So a big thing that I do with my patients is I teach them, right, how to read a label. here's things you might be doing in your routine that you never knew of, right? That could be leading to XYZ. And for most people, it's like shocking the first time they're hearing, like, oh my gosh, like I've been told I should filter my water, but I was never taught why, right? I was never taught that I shouldn't drink from a hot plastic water bottle in a hot car, right? I was never taught that I shouldn't just shop at the grocery store for my makeup or my shampoo, right? And for most people, it's like they're hearing it literally for the first time because, again, there's no like black box warning or big red flags and any of these things because half of the things on the shelves just wouldn't be there on otherwise. We just don't really have good law structure here.
100,000%. And I know that for us, we have started and we're pretty good now as far as like, if something, I'm done with it, like we've replaced all of our laundry soaps and our dish soaps. And I'm not quite there yet with my shampoo, but I just need some good alternatives. So if you have some suggestions,
But yes, I do have plenty.
but even my makeup, it's all organic and I do my own body oils and things like that because once you start looking, like you said, once you start looking at the ingredients and like, I should be able to pronounce all of that. I should be able to like know exactly what it is. And then even on our food, like we're starting to teach our kids of like, this should just be whole, real food ingredients that are on
Yes.
this. Bowl. Why do we need all of these other chemicals? And I think it was something crazy that like I heard this stat, and you can correct me if I'm wrong. It was like there are 10,000 chemicals that are allowed in our food in the United States that are not allowed in other countries.
Even scarier, another statistic that's like a very well known US fact is that out of the hundreds of thousands of chemicals that are made every day in the US, under 1% of them have been evaluated for safety. So most of those chemicals have never been safety tested ever. Ever, 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 which is crazy. So crazy to think there's hundreds of thousands of chemicals that we haven't even gotten to testing yet. And so, like the good companies out there that are doing the things, they are doing the safety testing and they are using plants and they are doing organic, right? But all the other stuff that's made up every single day, the new whatever 5 to 10 chemicals they invent probably every single week, they're just going right into everything.
So, as becoming a new mom here in a few days, what concerns you the most right now about the state of children's health in our country?
Yeah, yeah. And so for me, like particularly having grown up the other way, growing up the very standard conventional. I mean, I'm not kidding you when I say we ate McDonald's probably 5 times a week. And we were joking the other day, we had like a health event in our office and we were serving people like electrolyte lemonade. We were joking about the lemonade we all used to consume as kids and how like terribly toxic it is and how it's just got all these dyes and artificial sugars and all of that. But I think the most concerning thing is how many things are still normalized in children's health. And I see kids every day. Kids are like a big population that I see. Kids and moms, like families in general, is like my typical client base. But we just normalize so many things, right? That they are just going to need their tonsils out, that childhood obesity is totally normal and we're like worshiping these plus size individuals. I don't have anything wrong with those individuals per se, but I think we're like glorifying too many things that aren't healthy, right? When we can like intervene a little bit sooner and start teaching kids healthy habits because kids actually are super resilient. Kids' health and kids' healing takes so much little time compared to like an adult because they haven't lived a full life, right?
Yeah.
They don't have as many toxins they're burdened with. Their bodies, yes, aren't as immune adapt and they do get sick from time to time as their body grows and learns, but it doesn't mean we can't start teaching them like good habits now. So I think they deserve more. We deserve more focus into children's health about like, here are alternatives. Here are options. Here are things we can start teaching kids at a young, early age. And it's not necessarily restricting them either. I hear all the time, like, let kids be kids and they'll just have something with dyes and go to a birthday party, and I get letting them be kids, and I get letting them have screen time here or there. But I think there is other solutions and other things that, it's 2026. There's lots of things out there these days. There's amazing alternatives that I think are like just as delicious or just as fun to do. And it's like, well, why aren't we teaching parents that there are alternatives? So I think that bothers me too.
Yes, and I grew up on, like, Mountain Dew and short
Yes.
sandwiches and, like, Quick Trip hot dogs, and I'm thinking like, "Oh my god, gross." But anyways, I think what bothers me so much about that with kids is like, okay, it was just the end of the school year, and I know every end of the year, like, behavior for our kids is just totally out of whack. I know the schedule is,
Yes.
but they're getting like a cupcake every single day because they're trying to get in kids' summer birthdays. They want to be able to celebrate them before school goes out. And I am like, they don't need a cupcake every single day with all of
Right.
it.
Right.
Like,
Because then
they're
there's
not,
those kids that are like getting labeled by their teachers as like the behavioral disruptive kids, or the kids that like need ADHD medications, or the kids that have outbursts because they can't poop and they're getting prescribed Miralax. Like it's crazy. If we just like take a step back and it's like, whoa, what are we doing to them though? That's the
yeah.
problem.
Yes, 100%. And so our twins they also have a summer birthday. So they're like, Mom, we need to bring a treat in. I'm like, of course you do. But I found some popsicles that were like real fruit and
Yes,
real
they totally
milk,
exist. They're
and
delicious too.
they still exist. They taste good. The kids don't know the difference, but it's just finding the alternative. And once you get used to it, it's not as hard as people think.
No.
But there are still lots of hidden things and things that come up and just being able to ebb and flow. But like I 100% notice a difference when we are eating our normal, and we are not perfect by all means. Like there are still things that I'm like, don't have time. You're going to get this. But just simple tweaks, I would say.
Yes, and just being able to know and have the power to make the change when it's available to you, right? Is like, just if parents knew that they had an option, whether picking their kid was super overreactive one day and explosive and crazy versus maybe the lesser evil, then I think most parents would pick that, right? When it was available. So I think just even having the knowledge that there is other options, that their kids don't have to be just monsters every day, is would help a lot of families, right? And so that's what we talk about a lot here is like, okay, so and so is having a kind of rough emotional day, a rough week. What are we doing at home? What can we do to be better about this week? And luckily, chiropractic care makes a huge difference in kids and pediatric health and calming their nervous system. But there are so many other triggers too.
Yes, and I was just going to mention that too. Like chiropractic has been huge for our family and so many things. I mean, I think of, and I didn't know this when our first was a baby, but ear infections. Like now, if they
Mhm.
start to have an earache, I'm like, we're going to the chiropractor.
Yeah.
Pretty much like by the next day, their ear does not hurt. Like
Yeah. Like
other
nine
than
times
the
out of
very
10.
first, yeah, other than the very first time before I knew chiropractic, they had not had to have antibiotics
Mhm.
because we've gone to the chiropractor. My one of them has constipation, and so chiropractic, like, it be pretty much instant by the time we went to the office.
Yes.
I'm like but so many people, again, don't know that these options are out there, and so I love being able to just share and talk about it because just by being able to adjust your body, regulate the nervous system, I mean, that has even helped, like, we started going when one of my sons was just having so many outbursts. Like he'd start crying over everything. And it was like, just need to get the nervous system regulated. I know there's probably other things going on, but that made a huge difference.
Yeah, it does. It really does.
And I'm sure you see stories and hear stories like that every day in your office.
Yeah, it's an everyday thing. It's what most doctors would consider if they weren't familiar with what we do and they really didn't understand chiropractic. They would say it's a miracle. And I hear it all the time from kids that are going back to their pediatrician. They're like, well, that was a miracle. And it must have just worked for you. And it's like, no, it works for a lot of people and it works for a lot of people all the time. So I think that's the cool thing too, is like my parents that come and bring in their kids here are so well trained on like, okay, this is what we do optimally to create health outside the office. And this is what we know to do. And we know to bring them in when there's something going on that's just their body isn't adapting right. And it's just very clear. They listen to their little kids' bodies. They see the signals and the signs, and they're like, "Yep, time for a tune-up today. You got to go see Dr. Morgan."
Yes. And so maybe if we can talk to this for a minute, just because I had a friend reach out last night they just had a baby and their baby is very colicky. And I was like, have you been to the chiropractor? And that's something that they had not even thought of. So do you mind talking to like a colicky baby and how chiropractic can help?
Of course, colic is again nothing more than a symptom, right? It is a diagnosis based on like your baby's fussy all the time and they just don't calm down when they normally should. And that's all that colic really is. But I think so many parents just expect colic or expect that their baby has to have this witching hour or these witching hours of most colicky babies. Like I had a 2-month old that came in this winter and the mom was just so upset, just like, my baby, I should love my baby, but I cannot stand being around my baby because he just screams all the time and it's
Yeah.
stressing me out. I have another toddler to take care of and I don't think this is right. And she was not really into the holistic realm of things, but she was like, I know there has to be something different. And the pediatrician just isn't giving me any sort of solutions. And so you had a traumatic birth. He had some cranial imbalances, some stuckness of his cranium that literally was almost causing the brain to, when it swells, it doesn't move around super well. It doesn't pump that cerebrospinal fluid down. It doesn't communicate well with the rest of his body. Just super tension across just all of his body. And so we started out with some gentle chiropractic care. And within a few visits, she reported back to me, she's like, I cannot believe this. He smiled. He's never smiled. He's like a new baby. He doesn't cry all day. And we just spoke. I saw her actually, ran into her over the weekend, and she's like, I have literally a new baby because of you. He is the happiest, most joyful, normal, healthy 4-year old. Like, I regret not coming into you for 8 weeks and just accepting that and what the pediatrician was saying. So sometimes it's as bad as their labor and their delivery, right? How they were brought into this world, the stress that mom had during her pregnancy or the stress of birth, right? If they were forceps or vacuum, if they were C-section, right? What their initial few days looked like. And then for some, it's a combination of, well, what is mom eating? Right? Does mom have a really crappy diet? Is the baby allergic to something she's eating? Did the mom have some hormonal issues that now have gotten transferred down? And for some, it's a little bit more complex, but a lot of the time it's a minor adjustment or two. And we're making those changes very quick. And we're able to see some amazing progress with a lot of our parents and a lot of our babies within a minimal amount of visits compared to the struggle that they've really endured getting to that point.
Yes. Because I cannot function when my children are crying. And sometimes my husband's like, can't you just tone it out? And I was like, no, I can't. I
Yes.
literally cannot focus on a single other thing if my child is crying. So I could not imagine if they were just screaming for hours, because then you also start to become very impatient with the other toddler
Mhm.
that's running around. And oh, that poor mama. But I'm so happy that your team was able to help her because, like she said, I am sure it was just a huge relief, and to know, like, now her baby's not struggling anymore,
Yeah.
and
He's
and that
quiet, if anything. He's quiet. He just
content.
stares and laughs.
So, what do you feel, just kinda going back, I think maybe a two-part question of What conversation should families be having that maybe aren't happening enough, especially with what you see in your office?
I think the prioritization and education that you can create health at home, right? That health doesn't come from a bottle, right? Health doesn't come from an injection. Health doesn't come from going to see your pediatrician. I think it's a very backwards way that most people have been taught is that you see your doctor for these wellness checks, but they're not really wellness checks, right? Having those conversations at home, like what can we do to make sure we're not needing to go into the doctor all the time, right? Can we get movement in every day? Can we get some sunlight in and play outside? Can we minimize the toxins in our routine? Can we be intentional about our diets? Can we bring our kids to the chiropractor a little bit more regularly? Can we do things that create more wellness? It's not about perfection, right? Like you said, it's nearly impossible to be perfect by human design, but it's about knowing that you have those choices and that the more you do of those choices, the better your family's going to be all around. And it's going to cause so much less stress and just create a better family dynamic at home.
Definitely. I think a lot of those things you mentioned can be pretty simple shifts too. Like you said, I've just been learning so much more about the benefits of sunlight and morning sunlight. So now I just go sit on my deck and work on my deck for a while in the morning. Or like I've been teaching my kids because we're working on breathing and grounding if they're getting crazy. I'm like,
Yep.
so, and what then kind of flipping that, what's the biggest lesson that you've learned on your own healing journey that now shapes how you care for your patients?
Yeah. I think undoing the quick fix mindset is was like the biggest hurdle. And that was even like the biggest hurdle I had for maybe like even the first year of my natural health journey was like, oh, okay. I used to just take a medication when I had this and I would feel better within 10 minutes. Doesn't mean there isn't natural supplements you can get similar results for, but knowing that everything isn't a quick fix. I think that's been one of the biggest lessons. And that's why we reiterate with our patients. And I'm always, sharing with them that this is a journey. This is not an overnight fix. And like you said before, Haley, the things you did to get here likely didn't happen just in the last week or the last few days or the last year, right? This might have been years of your life compounding. For me, it took 20 something years to start taking my health seriously. And for some people, they're realizing the first time in their 40s or 50s, right? Or their 60s. And we're just accepting that as old age. But I think the more that we understand that it's not just a quick fix, it's not just a pill, it's something that you need to do and need to take care of to get the results you're looking for. It's not going to be immediate, but it's going to be impactful and it's going to be something that carries on with you and something that stays consistent, right? Just because you stop doing something that you've been doing, a good habit, for example, and you have like a cheat day 3, 6 months in, that's not resetting you back to square one, right? And it's giving yourself grace with that. And so knowing that, yes, if you go completely back to doing what you were doing and do that continuously, yes, you are going to go absolutely backwards. You are creating your own pickle, right? But for the people that just like have a bump in the road here and there, that's fine. That's normal. That's life, right? Health is not just this trajectory of a straight line. It's got its little bumps, but you're going to keep going upward and you're going to feel that continuous impact long term as long as you're doing that 90% of the time.
Yes, yes, 100%. Okay. So if there was one thing that people could walk away remembering today, what would it be?
I would say being able to listen to your body and know that you are truly not your diagnosis, that it's not some character flaw you have. It's not just something that you are unlucky enough to get, that your body is constantly communicating with you. And if you take the time to listen to it, it'll tell you some things. And you might not like those things, but ultimately, it's telling you what it wants and what it needs so that you can get the help that you deserve because you're trying to adapt. Your body's always trying to thrive and adapt. And sometimes it just needs a change or better support. So I think it's just not identifying with your diagnosis and your symptoms and letting that be you for the rest of your life. Because if that was me, like I said, I probably wouldn't be here. I would probably be struggling with like an IVF, or maybe I would have gotten that hysterectomy. I don't know. But I was lucky enough to be surrounded by people that were like, yeah, I don't think that's the right option. So I think just continuously reiterating that like common isn't normal, and really to start listening and paying attention to your body.
Thank you for sharing that and being so vulnerable and sharing your story because my guess is that there's other women out there that are struggling with this that don't
100%.
have those people in their corner to even know that there is options out there. So I really hope that this does help someone out there listening, and I know it will, but thank you for sharing that. Dr. Morgan, thank you for being here today. I will have all of your links, of course, located in the show notes, but if somebody wants to learn from you, come see you, come find you and work with you, where can they find you?
Yeah, so I am over at the Wellness Way, Eau Claire. We're in downtown Eau Claire, Wisconsin. We are on all forms of social media. And then I also have my personal, because again, I'm just a nerd about this and I love educating, empowering others. I have some resources that are free on Facebook. I have like a huge toxin free living group. I am on TikTok, Dr. Morgan Hope. I am on Instagram, Doctor of Hope. That's really where I started things when I was amidst the healing journey and shared a lot of my initial struggles. So yeah, I've been sharing and just empowering for years. And so come learn if you still want more, because I'm always sharing.
Yes, amazing. Well, thank you again. I appreciate you being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Haley. It was a blast.
Thanks for being here today. I hope this episode gave you something you needed, whether that's a new perspective, a resource to explore, or just the reminder that you're not alone in this journey. And if today's episode spoke to you, tag me on Instagram, share with a friend, leave a review. That's how we build stronger, healthier communities together. One practitioner, one story, one family at a time. So see you next week. And if you're a natural health and wellness practitioner with a story to tell, I'd love to connect. You can find me at practitionersrise.com.